Hello, I will talk about point and counterpoint, the end of CLT, a context approach to language teaching. Communicative language teaching has served the language teaching profession well for many years. One of the reasons for its popularity, as described successfully by Michel, for example, was its function as corrective to perceived shortcomings with other approaches and methods, such as grammar translation and the direct method. While it has to some extent achieved that aim, traditional methods still prevail in many parts of the world, and the benefits of an emphasis on communication are widely accepted in principle by professionals everywhere. The time travel. This is a quotation from a young teacher describing his arrival in Japan. In the manager of H.G. Wells' Time Travel, I stumbled on a school that had remained oblivious to developments in language teaching, where teachers looked at me strangely when I questioned their obsession with grammar translation and suggested that speaking was the most important skill involved learning a language. In my view, this displays an unfortunate attitude. A young and relatively experienced teacher comes to a new country, of which he has almost no knowledge. Without any reference to the culture, the learning context, students' needs and wishes, and other contextual factors, he immediately judges for more experienced teachers as failing, and what gives him a license to do so, as he sees it, is the fact that he is a native speaker and that he is armed with CLT. The CLT attitude, my real teacher and Johnson's imaginary one, share the notion that a country without CLT is somehow backward. This in turn rests on the unspoken assumed that CLT is not only modern, but is in fact the only way to learn a language properly. These assumptions can be found just about everywhere in the profession, as shown by a few examples from my own recent encounter to illustrate the embarrassment. Example 1. Czech Republic. A speaker at a teacher development conference in London states that teachers where she works in the Czech Republic are backward because they do not use CLT approach. But she also says with surprise that somehow many students still manage to learn to speak good English, and wonders how this could be. The idea that there could be some other way of learning English seemed to escape her. Example 2. A famous ELT author. A world famous ELT author at the IFTFL conference in 1997 state that in methodological terms many countries are still in the 1950s. The implication of this is that they are backward and therefore less good than we are. No discussion was made of whether or not their methods work. They are simply assumed to be definitions because they are not modern. Example 3. Holland. A teacher trainer worked in Holland states in a workshop presentation that the methodology used in Dutch school is traditional and therefore by implication backward and bad. But she is surprised to note that many Dutch people seem to end up speaking English well, and says that they do this in spite of their methods. As with example 1 above, the idea that people could learn English well without CLT seems either to escape her or to be a heresy too serious to admit. Example 4, Taiwan. A teacher and trainer in Taiwan writes, in general the teaching approach in Taiwan are still a little behind and based on rote learning in comparison with the more modern communicative approaches. This is in spite of the fact that these teachers' students speak far better English than he speaks Chinese. Again, we see the automatic assumptions which I identified above. If you don't have CLT, then you are backward and you cannot learn a language. Methodology, you can see the methodology picture, and this list focuses on one main area, the area of the teacher's role on chosen methodology. We may choose the call CLT an approach rather than a method, but this cannot disguise the fact that in one way or another its priorities relate ultimate to methodology. This is apparent both in its discourse and in the way in which teachers around the world conceptualize it. CLT is seen to be about the way we should teach. After all, it is communicative language teaching, not communicative language learning. To put it differently, if communication is at the top of the list and with it methodology in general, then everything else must be of secondary importance. The learning context may be claimed to be important, but since it is not top of the list of priorities, it is in practice considered as a relatively minor importance. Here we have the main problem of CLT. By it is every emphasis on communication and implicitly on methodology. It relates and sidelines the context in which we teach and therefore gives out the suggestion that CLT will work anywhere, that the methodology is king and the magic solution for all our pupils. By focusing our attention on what the teacher should do, it inevitably draws attention away from the context in which the teacher operates. Towards a context approach, to show this more clearly, let us set out the CLT attitude in contrast with what I will call the context approach. This approach disagrees fundamentally with the CLT attitude by arguing that methodology is not the magic solution, that there are many different ways to learn language, that the context is crucial determiner of the success or failure of learners. We can show the contrast like this, and you can see the CLT approach and context approach. CLT is the complete answer. Context approach, we must consider the whole context. CLT approach, if we don't have CLT, then we cannot a language. context approach, methodology is just learn one factor in learning a language. CLT approach, no other factors count in learning a language, only teaching methodology. Context approach, other factors may be more important. CLT approach, if you don't have CLT, then you are backward. And context approach, other methods and approach may be quality valid. The effects of the CLT attitude. I suggest that this promotion of method at the expense of context is observable throughout the profession. We have seen its impact on teachers and trainers' attitudes above. In teacher training, we've seen short training courses which are precisely the same for a trainee going to work in Vietnam. As for the trainee going to work in Angola. And the message is that by learning about methodology, you will be alright no matter what the context. Examination of the syllabus of such courses shows that methodology dominates and, more importantly, is placed at the beginning, middle, and with little emphasis or enabling teachers to interpret and deal with aspects of the classroom or with whatever social or national context they might meet. A different plant. The example of Dominic vividly illustrates the contrast between these two attitudes. Dominic was a teacher who had been working in Japanese secondary schools for some years when he decided to do a 1-month teacher training course at a well-known training center. When I interviewed him, he reported that the main focus was on methodology and that he was expected to follow a fairly strict pattern of teaching. Basically, the PPP method, you were assessed on the way that they were trying to put in across. I asked whether the course related at all to the teaching he had just been doing at Japanese school, Norway. The differences between my environment and the course, well, I mean it was like different plants. On the course, he was expected to follow a set way of going about set pattern of teaching, but since the course was run in Japan largely for teachers working in Japan, surely it would make reference to local context and encourage teachers to look at the context, at students' attitudes, at parents' wishes, etc. as a key feature. No, really? No, it was not really geared to that. I mean, the context of things was basically up to the teacher to try and apply the methodology to context. So how did he actually cope with the pupils when he went back to teaching? Where did he get the skills to deal with the local context? Self-taught, just being in the environment and observing. This seems to me typical of short training courses and at the same time lemon table. Surely a key part of good teaching is understanding and being able to analyze and reflect on the culture, the classroom, the pupils' needs, and so on. Yet these things were not touched on during his course. He was just left to work it out for himself. The assumption behind this again was that the K is methodology and that context is secondary to the extent that is completely up to the teacher to deal with. What about other approach? You can see lexical approach, methodology approach, the lexical approach, and other approaches show a similar marginalization of context. If we set out the priority of the lexical approach, for example, the list would obviously start with lexes in various forms. The emphasis this time is not on methodology but on language system. And similar problems arise since no methodology, being ousted from the top, seems to become relatively marginal in the lexical approach, as with CLT, the learning context is by definition treated as secondary. The hidden message of this is once again, the lexical approach, the follow no matter what the context, it will work and it will work anywhere. Approach to language teaching, the arguments above allow us to see approach to language teaching according to the type of priority, which is given main emphasis. We have approach which are A. Methodologically driven, including the direct method, CLT, and others, giving priority to methodological matters. We also have B. Language-driven approach, such as the lexical approach, grammar translation, and others, which give priority to one or more aspects of language. Both of these types of approach effectively treat context in the same way. By placing something else first, they by implication marginalize context. It will now be clear that this emphasis on methodology in the one case and